Hello and welcome, this is Silverox, and on today's episode we are going to be continue from last time, where I made the Fortnite Battle Royale revolver papercraft. On this episode we are going to be turning this model into a fully 3D printable model, and it will all be in STL files as well as the Blender file I use. Like always, if you like this and you want to get it yourself, you can go to my Patreon at patreon.com/silveroxcraft, where you can get these and many other projects like this. Also, remember to comment, rating and subscribing the video, it helps us a lot. Thank you and enjoy. So, as you can see right here in the bottom corner, I have the screen display key, so it's easier for anyone to accompany me while I do this. So the first part is we are going to need to modify the base mesh itself to prepare it for 3D printing, because you cannot export a mesh that has holes in it. Now these holes were left accidentally during the process of creating it, but for a papercraft model that doesn't really matter that much. But if we are working with the STL model to export, for example, into into Cura, it's different. We cannot have any holes. It must be a complete mesh. The other thing is, before I started, I took the liberty of separating all of the components except for the trigger, the hammer, and the trigger guard. They are still inside the same mesh. So the piece that I'm currently missing is the one that goes behind the cylinder. Now for that I'm just going to duplicate this, there we go. I'm going to shrink it down, I'm going to resize it till it's about touching these two corners right there. That's enough, and then just scale it back. So at this point I'm just adjusting it so it looks somewhat okay. It doesn't need to be perfect because we are still going to modify this piece as well. There we go, and just fuse this, and now this front section of vertices, you have to make sure that it is inside the body. The reason for that is because we are going to use a volume modifier to create this angle right here. Now if we are doing this as a papercraft model, that would be a problem, because we can't have, for example, a cut row into the face like this, because that would be a problem right here on this. But since we are going to use Subdivision surface modifier, oops, I actually added it to the wrong one right here, so let me just delete it, select this and choose Subdivision surface modifier. This is going to give us enough vertices to fix it, but before we do that, of course, we gotta sharpen the edges so that they look relatively okay. So I'm not gonna sharpen this all the way because of that flat surface right there. So I'm just going to do a bit right there. I'm not liking it, so I'm gonna retract it, extrude it forward and shrink it down. And there we go, and that looks like a decent circle. So of course the other thing, we need to know the name of our frame. Now I don't actually name my pieces while I'm doing this, so you can see it's just duplicates of each other. It's a bad habit of mine, but I don't bother naming them. So we're not going to select this, which is going to be the circle 4, because it is the fourth duplication of the cylinder, I believe. But we are going to add a volume modifier, and we know that our frame is plane 003, so just choose the plane 003. At the moment it completely disappeared because it's cutting it with the shape of the frame, so we want the frame to be the cutout, not the other way around. So we're just going to make difference, Shift H, we're gonna hide everything, and we are, you see here, this piece right here in the middle, it's actually the hole right there. That's not a problem, I will fix that later. But I don't want to apply it just yet because the frame itself is going to receive a subdivision surface modifier, and once that is done, it will actually change the contours of the insides. And if we apply this now, the contours will change later on, and you can see that that's going to be a problem. So just hide everything. Actually, hide everything except the handguards. The reason for that is because all the way around this, I'm gonna add a bevel. It's just gonna be a very small bevel, just enough so that now I can grab this edge right here. Oops. The reason why it jumps all the way around the mesh is because it looks for the shortest path between the two vertices you are clicking. And now we're just gonna go like that. We are actually going to be raising this. That isn't completely essential, but since this is going to be 3D printed, the frame won't be a big issue, but it's still reasonable to do so. So once again, subdivision surface. As you can see, it's completely rounded everything, but of course it's too rounded. Most of the detail can't actually, sorry, not a detail, most of its shape means that it can't actually attach to everything correctly. So now we can hide everything. And it's because of my boolean model for my I keep mixing things up, so don't worry, but because of the bevel that I add, it won't actually select the entire thing, so I much select it by hand. And there we go. So we press W, now Shift E, and that allows us to create this sharp edge all around. So we now have to do this to the other side of the bevel. The reason for that is I want this bevel to be relatively sharp compared to the rest of the revolver. And there we go. So now it's just a process of doing the exact same thing to these two. Both the outside one right here and the inside one. Oops, I forgot that Shift only selects one, Control is the one that selects everything. And there we go. Now that the majority of the frame is rounded off, we are going to need to fix these holes. Now, these holes need to be completely squared, so what I'm going to do is select everything and then just deselect. Well, I don't need to deselect, all you need to do is press, in this case, the C key to create the brush select. Then press, if you press normally, it just selects everything. If you press Shift, it deselects everything that it touches. So this just all gets left in place. There we go, completely squared. The same thing needs to be done to this one. The reason for this is the hammer and the trigger are completely square pieces, so they need to be pretty much in a square hole. And there we go. So if we bring everything back in, you can see that the frame itself is already much smoother than it was before. If you look, for example, at the grip, in the grip you can see all the individual faces that we have to have because it was exported at a papercraft model. I know I keep saying this, but there are a lot of limitations to doing so. As a 3D printer model, I can just select this and increase the view render, subdivision view, and it's already much smoother. While 3D printing, this won't even be visible. It will be pretty much a smooth curve. So we won't need to add any more details. We will need to is fix the holes themselves. Those are very simple. Now, do not fix let me see if I can select one right here. God damn it. the inside edges of the holes. The reason for that is because it will crease them, and if I show it from the front, it will make it have the shape of all of the individual faces you have. You don't want that. What you want is to have this like this. Just select these outside faces on. If it was if I wasn't using the mirror modifier, it would be the entire circle. Sorry, not the faces, the edges of the entire circle, and edge crease those. So just do the same thing for here. Always Shift E for everything. Now there is going to be a problem here, because it will want to select this. No, this could be an issue. Right here it won't be, because it will still create. No, actually I was wrong. As you can see right there, it's almost a straight line, because it's actually creasing these as well, so I can't have those. Instead I'm going to select edges and just select the edges that I need. You always have to be careful with what you actually select and don't select, because sometimes that can happen. Now if we bring everything back in, as you can see, the corners align with the corners of the grips, and from there on out there's a bevel all the way around it that will smooth out the frame itself and give it some grip. Now I want to add a few extra ones. Now these are cosmetic. I just want to add the creases to make them look better, and I believe that was just the only one I needed. I could make this one right here, and it does not look, you can see I don't like the way that looks, so there we go, smooth. And if we go back into this piece, you can see that now the shape has changed. Before it was, I actually forgot how many faces it had, but it was not a rounded surface, and you can see now it became a lot smoother than it was before. I just added the view tool to make it even remove even more faces, but that's just a cosmetic thing. Now for this piece, Shift H, I only want to work with these ones. Of course I will do the same process I did before. No, take in consideration that these two faces have to be completely creased, because these are the contact faces. These, and of course the outside faces, also have to be completely creased. That leaves us with that. And it looks okay, I guess. Let me just increase the view. Oh, I know what the problem is. I accidentally creased the inside edges, and that means that it made sharp edges on the corners right here, where the vertices are being connected with the inside. Of course, we just remove these and repeat the process. Now it's completely smooth. So the same thing goes for here. In this one, I actually gonna have to bring my frame in, because as you can see, this is what I was talking about. This is the connection between the trigger and the frame. As you can see, that's a complete square that I need to adjust the trigger for. Now I could leave the trigger as is, but I don't actually like that, so once again, always remove all the edges that you don't want. And this time I'm not going to go completely out, making this face completely flat. What I'm going to do is just scale it just enough to give it a smooth outside. This would be the equivalent for beveling, but it's not the same process, so you can't call it that. So once again, bring the frame out, because we are going to be working on this. Now, like before, this is a part that needs to be completely creased to adjust for the cavity where it goes. And for the rest of it is the exact same process that we used for the trigger. Select everything we want and then select everything that it's not needed and just extrude until you are satisfied with the shape it gives you. And that means that there's two parts done, the frame, the trigger guard and hammer done. So we can just put these aside. Actually, once again, I keep changing my mind, so let's grab the frame again, which is the reference piece for the entire thing we are doing, so you don't need to be here. And we are going into the grips. The grips is going to be the exact same thing we did before. Subdivision surface, increase the view, and you can see now it's the inside corners right here are rounded, which means that it's going to be a huge gap in this part. You can see the gap here, but if you bring them together, you can see on the other side the enormous gap that's left. So we don't need to fix this. Select this, select the entire edge, Z, so I can see everything selected, Control E, and it's creased. So now, as you can see, it smoothed the entire thing considerably compared to what it was before. Now this is the ideal shape you want this in. Of course, at the moment I need to hide everything and remove my not this one, because like before you can't have these edges right here selected, because it will leave a nasty crease on the model that I don't want. This gives it a smooth contour. If this edge was selected, as you can see, this is a much better example. It actually makes a point right there where the two vertices of the edge were. I don't want that. So I bring everything out, move this back out, and show the frame again. And now the frame itself is completely encapsulated by the grip. No, not the frame itself, that's a part of the grip. Now as you can see right here, there's a slight gap. No, I'm not going to worry about that. It's just cosmetics, but if you wanted, you could go back in, select that edge again and crease it, and it will cover up that point. I don't need it, so I'm going to leave it behind. Now there's a few things that we're going to need to do. If you remember, when I first made this, the barrel itself does not have an attachment point for the frame, and the grips do not have an attachment point for the frame. Now I'm gonna be opening one of the images I have right here. Let me see. So I'm gonna hide everything. You can see there's a screw right here. This screw is the design itself would be attaching the grip to the frame. What I'm gonna do, I'm just gonna have cursor tool selected, a cylinder right here. So rotate it, actually rotate it inside the edit mode. Oops, not the AR. Scale it down completely, let's scale it up on the x-axis. And I'm going to position it right about where the screw is and the size of it. Now for this, now I'm going to need to get the grip as close as possible to the frame. The reason for that is because this is going to be the screw, and the screw is going to need to be almost flat with the grip. So this will be flat, and I will need to put it slightly inward. Of course, I cannot use the one that I have currently here as a cutting surface for the Volta grip and the frame. The reason for that is because it would not fit when it was printed, because there would be no gap in between. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to select this, duplicate it, scale it up, and as you can see, this is the original pin that's going to be, or the screw that's going to be inside, and this is the cutout. The cutout, I'm just going to make it big enough that there's a considerable gap between it, and the pieces that attached to, and I'm gonna pull it outward. Of course, this needs to fuse in the middle, and there we go. Now, this is one of the few times I do rename pieces when they need to be cut pieces for only all other parts. So I'm gonna name this cut 1. The reason why it's cut 1 is because I don't know if I'm gonna need other pieces to create holes or other surfaces. So it's easier just to think ahead. So select our original grip. We can add now the volume modifier and select the newly made cut surface. As you can see, it's the same thing, it just cuts it with the shape of what you are in the middle, so we just add difference, and if we hide this, you can see that now a nice hole in it, and we just duplicate the process for the frame. Select our cut surface, select the difference, and hide everything but the frame, and there we go, there's a perfect hole right there. So we can hide this, and now on this one all you need to do is create the groove that goes down the middle to replicate the appearance of a screw. So just bring it aside, delete these two, and there we go, that's completed. This can go, and you can see the appearance of the screw is left inside, and of course, because these pieces are now pivoting pretty much on that pin right there, they will be easier to attach to the grip and have them be completely aligned with the outside. So that serves two purposes, a cosmetic one and a functional one, and those are usually the best ones. So we can now add the Subdivision surface modifier to our retaining pin for the cylinder. As you can see, this would be roughly the shape that you would want. This is what I had to do to make it printable as a papercraft model. I keep saying papercraft model and I'm starting to annoy myself, but this is the shape it had. And of course, I'm actually enjoying the way this looks. It looks a lot like the original ones, but I do need to duplicate it several times, so I'm just gonna add everything except that, add a cut right there, and delete this, select everything, these two, and oops, just select these, scale it as to scale, press Y to scale it on the Y, press 0 on the numpad and enter, and that makes them completely aligned. So we just press W, remove doubles. So if we go out, this is what it looks like now, and I believe that's more than enough. So we just select these two, making sure that we are in X-ray view, so we can select the ones at the other side. Press space, type bridge, and you can see bridge edge loops. And now that is done. There is the front part of the pin, much better than I would hope it would get, but it's actually quite remarkable how it ended up. So just select this, crease it, make it into a flat on the bottom, bring everything in, hide the cylinder so we can see what we have done, and we can actually notice something. This is the same problem that we have on the grip right here. As you can see, it needs a gap around. Now this looks like a huge gap, but trust me, if once you 3D print this probably won't be enough of a gap. But this one does not have a gap at all, since the circle that I have here is the same circle that I used to make this. There's hardly any gap at all. So what I'm gonna do is gonna duplicate this. I'm gonna name it cut 2, press enter, just select this and the frame, shift edge, because I only want the cut surface and the frame in the view. Go here, I'm going to be deleting this entire thing because it's not needed. I'm going to be extruding this forward, pressing all the keys that I need to make it into a solid piece. And now we are going to scale this up. Now if you scale it up, you can see it will go back too far. I will be fixing that later, but for now I do need to make a proper scaling. So I'm just going to scale it normally. Oops. And if you are wondering, I am following myself by this in a circle right here. You can barely see it, but that is the surface I am following. So I'm just going to scale it up until there is a considerable gap between the two of them. Now I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to back in. As you can see, this pushed our pin far back too much. So we're just going to bring it so it's just slightly overlapping the bottom. You don't want it to have this, otherwise it will be a step here and it won't fit the containment, the retaining pin properly. So of course we are going to go into here, add another volume modifier and select our cut tool. Once again, difference, and we can hide this, and you can see that the hole is actually larger than it was before. I can't get a proper view because I brought everything in. There we go. And you can see there's already a substantial gap there. If I wanted, I could shrink that down, but I think that's going to be about what we need, because if you remember, we are looking at this very closely, so the gap looks much bigger than it actually is. So this is what we are left with. Now, not to leave this behind, we need to make sure that this fits inside of the frame, because otherwise it's just completely floating here, as you can see. Now for that I need to make of course a few alterations. The subdivision, it's obviously the one we are going to go straight for, but we need this. Let me just hide everything. Crease the inside, crease the outside, so it makes a flat. And I'm gonna crease the one right here to make that even into a sharper transition. And there we go. That's okay by me. So I'm just gonna crease the inside, and that's pretty much where we are gonna leave it. So what I could do is select this entire thing, extrude it. Whoops, I actually selected the entire inner barrel, don't want that, and extrude it inward. The problem is, as you can see, it almost doesn't leave enough of a gap here. So what I'm considering is something that may or may not work in the end, but I'm gonna add a crease right here, so a cut right here, crease it of course, because we are going to be using this as the entry point for our frame. Now I'm gonna pretty much just dig a hole almost all the way to the back, and if I bring the frame in, that's about where I'm going to leave it. Now I need to make two different cuts here, or maybe I'll just make one. My original idea is I would make one cut in the middle, but because of the design of the gun, the barrel doesn't exactly align with the cylinder, so I'm going to leave that idea behind. Instead, I'm going to be duplicating this. I select what we have and call it cut 3. So go back in, delete pretty much everything because we don't actually need any of it. Delete even that. Delete the inner circles. Close these faces, delete that one, and now extrude this forward. Now what I'm going to do here is, because I don't have a reference for how much I'm increasing it, I'm just gonna duplicate it and increase it like this. Now the reason for this is I'm gonna have the original one here as a reference, and I'm just gonna then scale it back to where it needs to, and then I'm gonna delete the original one. Now this one doesn't need any scaling, so yeah, click at least one vertex, Ctrl L to select the entire thing and delete it. So now we can bring it back out, select the frame once again. I'm just gonna hide this so it's easier to manage, and add another volume modifier. As you can see, the frame is the one that needed the majority of the modifications because it needed to hold pretty much every piece we have. So that's the reason why the frame right now has, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4 different volume modifiers. Of course, as well as the original mirror modifier. So this is now able, let me just select the cut piece, select this cut piece, and there we go. Now the barrel is able to fit right inside the frame right there. So our last step is going to be the cylinder. No, actually there's one piece before, and that is the front sides. That's easy, it's just the same process I use for the rest of the pieces. Now these do not make this bottom face completely creased, because it needs to follow the contours of the barrel. So I'm just going to be creasing specific parts of it until I get a reasonable shape. Yeah, it's not gonna work like that, so I'm just gonna leave it like this, and you can actually fit this over the slope right here, but the back I still need to crease it just slightly. This should be enough to make that curvature. So that is that piece, so I'm just gonna crease this, and there we go. Now we are finally going toward the cylinder. The cylinder was the first piece I made for the papercraft model, and apparently it's going to be the last piece I make in the 3D printed model. Now, as you can see, the Subdivision surface modifier actually completely destroys the cylinder, but that's okay, we are used to working with these kind of things. Now remember that we need to add something to this. Now that something may completely destroy the shape of our cylinder, and that means I may need to rebuild it, but I'm gonna need to do it anyway. And that is the cut tool. If you remember that, that is the piece that, there we go, that is the piece that the retaining pin needs to function, because otherwise it wouldn't actually go into place. You would need to sand it a lot, and of course you want to 3D print these pieces as close to the final shape as possible without needing to make any modifications to them, and that of course means the sanding process. So what we are doing here is creating unnecessary creases, because I accidentally creased the inside right there. Of course, we do not want to crease the pieces that go, the edges that go from the insides to the outsides of the cylinder, because that will leave sharp corners on the outside, which we do not want. So this is just a simple crease. If I can select the inner one, that creates that. But of course one of the problems is now completely rounded. We can fix that by sharpening the corners, but I think I'm gonna leave it like that, because the alternative is me doing something like this and sharpening those corners, but as you can see it doesn't really end up well. So something else we could do is this: press Y, but once again, let me see if in the outside it works. It doesn't really want to, but oh well. I'll think of a way to fix this, but for right now I'm gonna go to the back and of course finish this part. And as you can see, that's gonna be a bit of a problem because the faces are all really small, but hopefully once we crease them back into place, it will be enough. And of course I accidentally, since I'm using the shift function to select sorry, not the shift, the alt function to select more than one vertex at a time, what tends to happen is if I select slightly too close to this point right here, it selects this. If I select this slightly too close to this, it selects this one. So you have to be careful with the pieces you are highlighting. As you can see, I accidentally selected it, so I'm just gonna unselect it. It's an annoyance, but it's very easy to deal with, and if you are ready for it, it actually doesn't bother you at all. I'm just used to it happening. So it turns out that this is actually nicer than I was expecting it. So I'm just gonna crease the outside to leave that bevel right there. And I believe I do know a way to do this, and that is to just select these and crease them, but of course it also creases the outside, so I'm just gonna crease them just enough, just about like that. So deselect all of that, select everything, and I'm gonna crease them right before the deformation starts. So if I do this, you can see that it actually doesn't work completely, but I'm gonna be working on this, try and figure out a way to remove all of these. So give me a moment. So in the end, I decided that it is acceptable to leave it as it is. I tried to increase the view, but the excess faces seems to have a bit of a problem. So I'm gonna keep it as it is without changing that. Hopefully, while exporting this, it looks better than it does here, but it is an acceptable compromise that I'm willing to make. So right now we have everything done. Now this isn't the last step, because for applying all the modifications I tend to apply it in a different file. So I'm just gonna go this final, and this now is a file where I can simply apply everything to it. So just like that. We can apply all the modifications we have, because we are going to need to move these pieces separately. Of course, apply this. This is the one piece we need to make a few modifications, and that's selecting this and deleting it. There we go. That is the only modification that this one requires after completion. So we can go back. This isn't needed. Apply this. Apply this. Apply this. And these are the three. So I'm gonna go one last time, making sure that everything has all of the modifications applied to them, because the last thing I need is to accidentally leave a modification unapplied and then doing this, deleting the parts that we don't need. So right now the revolver is completely designed, so we are gonna need to lay it flat. So that's a simple process. And now this is where I tend to name my pieces, but this time I won't. I just leave it the individual ones like this. Now the reason why I'm doing this is I want a flat surface that it can go onto the printing bed. That means that all of the pieces can be exported individually and they all will be printable. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go back before everything was started moving everything, and I'm gonna scale this into a proper size, because at the moment this is actually considerably small because I'm doing it at the default blender. Where is they go? I'm using centimeter. I'm going to use centimeters, and I'm just going to use the barrel as an example. As you can see, the measure is just 6 millimeters long, because this is on the 3 centimeters long, because this is on the default setting. So I'm going to be scaling this up, and I'll be right back. So what I have right here is the plane with the dimensions that I currently have set into my original papercraft model. Now those are a 15 centimeter height from the bottom of the grip to all the way to the top of the front side, and a 26 centimeters from all the way to the front to the back. Now a way to resize it is very simple. Select all the pieces and just scale them up accordingly to your, in this case, my plane. Now I could have made this a different way. I could have made it so that the gun itself had the proper dimensions all the way from the beginning. But since this is an originally a papercraft model, Pepakura doesn't keep the dimensions completely right, and it does change them, allows you to change them afterwards. So I do that, I just change them afterwards. So you can see now, this is the fully resized revolver, and of course this is the full layout of the revolver. All the pieces that are inside of, not inside, that are needed to make this specific build. Of course we have the frame, the cylinder, the covers for the back are not attached to the frame, they are separate pieces like we made before. The pin that holds the frame to the grip, the barrel, the retaining pin for the cylinder, the front sights, the striking hammer, trigger, and the trigger guard. Now in total we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 13 different pieces that are probably not going to be displayed in that many different files. So right now I'm going to be exporting these as STL files, as you can see right here. But if I do this, it does export them all at once. Let me just show you. So it just exports that final because it's the name of the file we are using. So we are going to here, we have this final right here, and this will take a bit of a while to open Kira, so I'm going to pause it until Kira is open. And here will be the final result, all the pieces laid out. But of course, as you can see, the layout is a bit different from the one I showed you before. Now the reason for that is there is a problem where if you set everything into centimeters or millimeters, you can see that the dimensions right here do change, but they are still the same values. The decimal point just moves over. Cura apparently does not take that into consideration, so it just takes the values that you do have and assumes that it's always millimeters. Oops. So the original one I scaled down actually had this. actually smaller than that. It had them at about that scale. The reason for that was, as you can see right here, it has me as 11 centimeters from the y-axis from this corner to the other. So if this was exported as if here it said centimeters and I change it to millimeters, it would change this distance to 1 millimeter. So be careful, always pick the right unit that you are going to be using for Cura. With that said, as you can see, let me just put this back at 100%. Right now it's grayed out because it's too big to fit on the table. So I'm just going to scale it up by 90%. The reason for that is just so it assumes it's natural color. This would be all of the pieces laid out. Of course, some of these pieces will require support, so mainly these two will require, let me see if I can find the option right here. There you go. It would require a brim. What the brim is it makes a circle all around the base. Let it just create this one so you can see. As you can see, it creates that circle around the base, so that it has a much larger support when it's printing this. So I'm gonna go into solid view because it's so laggy because of the amount of pieces faces that are available. So this is the general layout. So of course this is going to be available to my patrons under my $5 tab, so if you want this, do go to my Patreon. It does help me a lot. So I do hope you enjoyed this video. I do hope you leave a comment. It always helpful, so have a nice day.